Buenos días. Today we're going to talk about impersonalizing statements. So there are going to be some times in your language in general when you want to avoid having one specific subject for a statement. And so you're going to want to try to impersonalize your statement. There are two different ways of doing it, in English and then also in Spanish. So the first way that we're going to look at today is in English would be the equivalent of one does this or they in general do this. So like they in general, people over there in France. This is different than the ellos, which is specific people like Raúl and Pablo. But when we're talking about they, you know, all those people over there, they in general. And that would be the appropriate way, the best grammatical way in English to say that would be to say one does this. So for example, if we want to say in high school they study a lot, or in high school, the appropriate way, the more grammatically correct, one studies a lot, you would say one studies books a lot in Spanish. And that's the impersonal say. The second way to kind of make a statement impersonal is to use the passive voice. And you actually take the subject, studies what, books, and you flip it into the object, books, and you flip it into the subject position. So you have books are studied a lot in high school, and you'll notice I avoided saying who's studying them at all. So first we're going to take a look at this one, the one or the they way of forming it. And then secondly, we'll take a look at the passive construction where we flip them. They're very similar in Spanish, but a teeny tiny bit different. In order to make the first type, when we want to say one does this, we're going to take first of all, you drop the subject. So you cannot state a subject. So you cannot say they, you cannot say ellos, you cannot say anything like that. So you eliminate the subject, because that's the whole point of this. And instead we use se. And then we're always going to use the third person singular form of the verb. So you're talking about someone form of the verb, and when it's singular. So it's going to be the él or the ella form of the verb. And that could be in any different tense. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the present tense, although usually it is. So, for example, if you want to say, oh, how does one say that in Spanish? I'm not sure how one says that. You would say, ¿cómo? How? Se, because there's no subject, and then the él or ella form of the verb decir is dice. So, ¿cómo se dice potato? So we've actually said this a lot. So every time we were saying that, we were actually using the se impersonal. So again, it is you drop the subject. Oh, goodness. Look, you got an arrow there. And secondly, you use a se. And then lastly, you use the él or ella form of the verb. So, ¿cómo se dice potato? Another popular one that we'll see often here is ¿cómo se escribe? How does one write? So, ¿cómo se escribe? And that is our se impersonal. The second way we're going to do it is if we want to avoid the subject by saying something, for example, like books are sold. So you notice there's nothing there that says who is selling the books, right? But the verb here is going to be vender. And our formula for this one is se plus either the él or the ella form if it's a singular thing that's being sold, or the ellos or ellas form if it's a plural thing that's going to be sold. So here we have books are being sold. So we would start off with se, and then we would choose venden libros. Se venden libros. And this would mean books are sold. This is a form that we use a lot for signs, for example. You actually have probably seen this a lot. Se habla español. And this would be an example of the singular here. Español is singular, and so we chose habla. And what this is actually saying is Spanish is spoken. Spanish is spoken here. So this is how we use a passive construction to make something a little more impersonal. So in review, we have two different ways to use this se in order to impersonalize a statement. The first is called the se impersonal, and it's se plus the L form only of the verb. And we do this when we want to say one does this, when the subject is one in general. And then when we want to say this is done instead and flip the object into the subject slot and avoid even the one as our subject, we use a se also. And sometimes we use the L form if we have one thing, but we need to be careful on this example that if we have more than one, then we do make it plural. And that would end up saying this is done. So an example of this is se habla español, se lee libros. This would be se lee libros en la biblioteca. One reads books in the library. But if we want to say books are read in the library, then it would be se leen libros en la biblioteca. So small difference. I think you'll know when to use this and when to use this depending on what you want to say. If you want to say one reads books in the library, then you're going to say se lee libros en la biblioteca. If you want to say books are read in the library, then you're going to say se leen libros en la biblioteca. And you'll know. 9 times out of 10 we use this in sign form when we are posting signs. And we use this when we're just talking in general about places or things.